So in Florida, state lawmakers are working on a bill to protect the rights of students, but not from too much homework or mean lunch ladies. They are trying to protect students from biometrics, things like fingerprinting or retina scanners. The new bill would prohibit school districts from collecting biometric information, including the characteristics of fingerprints, hands, eyes, and the voice. It would force schools to inform parents about their rights regarding education records being collected on their son or daughter annually. It would prohibit school districts from collecting information on a student's political affiliation, their voting history, or their religious affiliation. And finally, the proposal would protect a student's information from being passed along to the federal government unless it was absolutely required under federal law. So I know what you're thinking. Why is a proposal like this even necessary? Well, Polk County parents found out last year that their children were having their eyes scanned without their permission. Pinellas County schools, meanwhile, were scanning the palms of pupils in lunchrooms in order to access their accounts for money to pay for those lunches. Seminole County schools scan students for their fingerprints, and the list goes on and on. But are these parents justified in their fears, or are they just overreacting? Michael Walsh is a columnist for PJ Media and the New York Post, and he's also the author of the Devlin thriller trilogy that centers around the NSA. He recently wrote an article in the New York Post entitled "Welcome to the United States of Paranoia." Earlier, I spoke with Walsh, and I first asked him if he thought these parents were really overreacting.
Yes and no. I think what we've learned in the last few years, and certainly in the last year or so, is that, as I said in the New York Post yesterday, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. And that we have to be very careful about giving up our privacy to technology that is meant to preemptively prevent crime or problems. And it gets really to the issue of whether we can prevent things from happening, and we should therefore enslave ourselves to prevent bad things, or whether a certain amount of risk is part of life. Now, I happen to fall into the latter category, but that is a big discussion going on right now.
So what danger does a retina scan or a palm reader realistically pose? Are we becoming a culture of convenience, wanting technology to do everything for us instead of using IDs, for instance, or carrying money?
Yes, this is exactly what's happening. What we've discovered is that the technology is wonderful. Our phones, our computers, every new app that comes out. But every time we adopt it, we give up a little bit of privacy. So that on Facebook, for example, you're constantly posting your whereabouts, you're putting stuff up on Pinterest, you're posting photographs. And in a perfect world, the government wouldn't be watching us. But in an imperfect world, especially post 9/11, the government is watching us. So it becomes a political and moral question: how much do we want to give up in order to protect ourselves? That's the issue.
And as you mentioned, that's a fact of life. From the moment you are born, information is being collected about you these days. Is there anything that parents can do to protect their children from technology, barring taking pictures of their children and not putting them on Facebook?
Well, really not, because we're moving again since 9/11. We're moving towards a society in which we have essentially an internal ID card, much as you did, for example, in the Soviet Union, a country in which I spent quite a bit of time in the 80s before the collapse of the Soviet Union. We haven't moved to internal passports yet, but that may well be coming as well. The fact is that the government will take everything that is offered to it, and we have to be careful about how much we voluntarily give up. And then the political issue, of course, becomes how much surveillance are we prepared to accept in order to be protected from oftentimes illusory threats or threats that are largely in our imagination and fears.
And I think that is a question that Congress is still struggling to answer. Now, on a similar topic, Europe's largest group of hackers, the Chaos Computer Club, teamed up with the International League for Human Rights to file a complaint against German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the German intelligence community for cooperating with NSA surveillance activities activities. Part of that complaint read, quote, "We accuse the U.S., British, and German secret agents, their supervisors, the German Minister of Interior, as well as the German Chancellor of illegal and prohibited covert intelligence activities, of aiding and abetting those activities, a violation of the right to privacy, and the obstruction of justice in office." So that's what they are complaining against. Interestingly, this comes as Chancellor Angela Merkel was sharply criticizing the U.S. for spying on her activities, but again, she was helping the NSA and their surveillance community spy on others. So how can we evaluate the criticisms given that she is closely working with the NSA?
Well, that's a good point. Let's put it this way. They're watching everything, and whether they say they are or they're not, they are. Whether the law says they can or they can't, they do. So this is just the world we live in now. They hoover up vast amounts of data. They check the metadata, all the phone calls you've made, who you're calling, all that stuff, runs through these giant computers. And these intelligence services of the Western countries are very closely allied with each other, and there's a great deal of information sharing. Now, whether this has prevented further attacks on the scale of 9/11, there's really no way to know. The government says, yes, it has. Private individuals say, not based on anything we know. The government says, trust us. And we say, can we trust you? So we are really falling in between these two stools of advanced technology, fear, and our own eagerness to embrace technology to tell the world what we're doing. Everyone wants to be a movie star these days, but that comes with a price, and we have to be aware of what that price is going to be.
Absolutely, and whether or not it is us voluntarily rendering that information, putting it out for anyone to see, or whether it's data mining and the NSA and all the things that are going on with that, it all just goes into one big web that is the internet that is creating these profiles digitally on us. Michael Walsh, a columnist at the New York Post and PJ Media, thank you so much.